Well, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. It's early.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you listen to it, I guess. If you listen to it.
Yeah. When are we gonna drop the little hints or drop our little clues to see if how long people are listening?
Uh,
Right. About every 5 minutes, we'll try to figure out say something
yeah, yeah.
stupid.
That's one thing I hope I never get concerned with because
Yeah.
this isn't for the. It's for the mass, but it's not for the mass. Um, the
Yeah.
masses. The masses really won't put in the time. They want the easy. They want, and this is not. This is the most difficult thing you ever take into your hand to do. Um,
Well, I think we last week, we were just talking right before we started, and I think one thing we did last week or the in the last session, it's been a couple longer than a week, but I think we did a good job of talking about the chat. Again, not kind of belaboring the trials and tribulations and challenges, but the
mm-hmm.
fact that this thing is not for the everyday Sunday morning person. I mean,
Well,
it's
I mean it's
intent.
it's available to anybody.
Yeah,
Anybody that'll jump in. Because I'm not trying to scare anybody off, but I'm not. At the same time, I'm not trying to coddle anybody. Um, I'll be your biggest cheerleader, man. I'll rah rah yawn, and be there for you, and help as much as I can. But at the same time, I'm not gonna chase anybody to be a part of this. That's not what this is about. This is to help those people that are really interested in fulfilling the Great Commission. And that's something we talked about before we jumped on was I want to go back to the Great Commission a little bit and talk. But I think this format of conversation, the back and forth, kind of keeps you know you know just like now you're able to think about what people might be asking questions about,
yeah,
and then when you talk, I can do the same thing, and that really helps to feed off of each other. So I think it's a really beneficial format, especially like we've said multiple times. We're just trying to capture the conversations we've had over the years. That really has benefited us in the process.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I agree.
the main idea is centered around uh, the Great Commission. Some people, I know it's hard to think about, but some people may be going, "What are you talking about, Great Commission?" Um, I hear, or they may say, "Hey, I hear that, but I don't know what it really means." Or they could be like I was. I remember, those monumental moments in life um, when you know you have those either big high mountain experiences or monumental moments in a believer's life. Um, this was my biggest. I don't even have a clue at what to do with that feeling. I remember where I was sitting and where I was. The guy was preaching on Matthew 28, 16 through 20, talking about the Great Commission. He was speaking about the Great Commission, but what he was saying was not matching up with it. And I looked at the Great Commission, and I remember feeling, I don't know what to do with this. I have no idea what to do with this. I mean, that's the helpless feeling
Yeah,
of sometimes when you read something in Scripture or something, you're like, I don't know what that means. I don't even know how to apply that. I don't know. If somebody put a gun to my head, I wouldn't even know which way to run. Uh,
yeah.
I mean, maybe that's unique to me. Maybe I'm just that thick in the skull. Um, I don't know. Maybe other people feel the same way. You know, what do you mean by Great Commission? What do I do with it? You know, most people when they read the Great Commission, or not most people, I keep saying stuff like that. I wish I could break that habit. Um, but
The
there has to be
assumption.
some people that look at the Great Commission and think, well, I don't want to be a missionary.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, you're thinking about the first time my exposure was in a church that was attempting to, at that time, without saying names, they were attempting to be Saddleback,
Mm,
Rick Warren, when it was really moving back in the mid to late '90s, and then I get there in the early 2000s, and it's like everything about the Great Commission to me was this movement of community, of evangelism, and there was very, very, very little about discipleship or disciple, definitely not much about disciple making.
right.
And then in the same time, all that's happening 20 plus years ago, and you're talking about, I remember where I was, and I think those are divine moments
Yeah.
that God, like, I've got several of those, many, but those divine moments where you remember the place, you remember almost the smell of the atmosphere. You can put yourself back in that place,
Hmm.
almost nostalgic at
Yeah.
times. And I remember what I was doing. I remember what I had been doing for several weeks, and I had been literally crying out to God to show me something to do, because what I was doing at that church had zero fulfillment.
Mm,
And I was looking at the emptiness, I was looking at my frustration, and then, the book Tally Ho the Fox
mm,
was literally put into my lap. And then I didn't feel the weight of the Great Commission the same way you did, like in that same situation. But I think the way that we both got there was similar. And I
mm,
think that's the similarity with most people is, if the people that really end up, from what my experience, the people that really end up continuing to take this to where Jesus intended it to go, and this being the Great Commission, are the people that literally are undone, broken, at their wits end.
hmm.
They can't go, like, there's literally, they're in a deep dark well of no water, no food, nothing. You're in absolute desperation. And you might not even be having a terrible day. You might not even be having a bad life. It's just something's not clicking.
Right.
And then the process of what the Great Commission does is, man, the greatest fulfillment in your life is it will fulfill every desire there is in your life,
Right.
in this human life.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I think a lot of hearing about this comes out more from frustration than it is than anything else.
Yeah,
And
that's the word.
that the most kindest, that's a good word, the kindest thing that God could do for you or to you is allow you to be frustrated or get you frustrated. And
Yeah,
you have to see the contrast. You have to see the scripture for what it's saying, and then you have to look at what we're doing, and then go, these aren't even close. You know, how do we get from there to, you know, how does what we do fulfill anything concerning this in the scripture? And I mean, just like the Great Commission, once you really understand what you're supposed to be doing here, um, you look at the system and you're like, how in the world is this system going to help me do that? I mean, you think it will at first, but then you realize it won't. Not
And
that,
when you say system, I mean, of course, the organized religious
yeah,
thing we
yeah,
call church. Yeah.
right. And I'm not against. I don't think we need to burn them all down either. They do have a,
I've already attempted that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll say that's a, not physically, but more symbolically. We don't want to be accused of arson.
Very
Uh,
symbolically,
yeah, yeah.
very much,
Uh,
all 100% symbolic.
right.
Yes.
But it can be frustrating to, especially when these ideas take over in your heart, um, and it burns a space in your psyche, in your spirit,
Mm.
and you can't get away from it. You know,
Yeah.
um, yeah. Then it kind of clears the decks on what will work and what won't work. So
Well, and as we and I'll ask you the question. I don't, not that I don't want to answer it, but as we move on today with the conversation, and even where we're at right now, what keeps going through my head is the going goes back. I don't know if it was the week before. It just hit me about the wilderness idea,
yeah,
and it just hit me. But we were attempting to not portray the Great Commission as an impossible mission. I don't think you have to portray the Great Commission as an impossible mission. It does it for you.
yeah,
And the way we've realized that it is impossible is that we have tried, we have done it,
right,
we have been sucked into the vortex of what Jesus left behind in his men,
right,
and what we see Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John show. What we see the book of Acts, which is the acts of the apostles, the very actions that they portrayed for 28 chapters in that book,
hmm,
to show this is what, not just what the church is supposed to be like,
yeah,
but this is the life of Jesus in humanity.
yeah, right,
This is the divine left behind in the not divine, but this is, and so I go all the way back and say, hey, like I said earlier, which you come in and corrected me with that, which, I mean, not corrected me, but it's this idea of, we're not trying to say that our way's right and your way's wrong. That I don't know if I don't think I do that anymore. I used to do that, and I think that's that
yeah,
zealousness in me.
uh,
And now it's like, I'm not going to wrestle with somebody about whether or not this is right or not. I know it's right for me. I know that's what God has shown me in Scripture, and it's going to make me a jackass to a lot of people. And there we go. I mean, that word's in the Bible. Ass is all over the Bible. We're good. So but it's like you, it's like you've got to, there's got to be an ownership
yeah,
of this commission,
right,
and you can own your idea of the Great Commission. You can own it, and it be so far from what Jesus's truth of the Great Commission is, that you're owning something that is not really true.
yeah,
Like you're owning a church's idea of what it means or what it looks like to be obedient to the Great Commission. Whereas
yeah,
I feel like ours is, I feel like I'm kind of sold out. Well, I know I'm sold out. It's like now, anytime somebody starts talking about the Great Commission, I lean in.
yeah,
And the reason I lean in is not necessarily to see what they say, but I lean in because I'm like, I about guarantee you it's not anything close to what my understanding of the Great Commission is. And I have been surprised at times,
hmm, yeah.
but it does not happen much.
Not much, yeah, and that just speaks to what we have made this out to be. It's, you know, a lot of times I feel like, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I feel like that when I'm talking to somebody about the Great Commission, I feel like I'm standing on the beach on the Atlantic, in the Atlantic Ocean, and I tell them, okay, swim to Europe, and they look at me like, yeah, you're a jerk, you know, you know. Okay, I can swim, but there's no way I can swim to Europe or get to Europe on my own power. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's completely valid. Yes, I agree with you. I'm the same way. But what Jesus is, and I don't want to reduce him to a boat, but but that's what he's a vehicle to get you into to where you
Mm,
could not get on your
yeah.
own. And it's not like you're going to be on a luxury liner either. It gets you there, but understand there's going to be some times you're going to think you're going to be stuck in water. You know, it's going to
You're going to
feel,
be fighting. You're going to be wrestling against oars.
yeah, it's going to be. He definitely wants you to get there, but he does not want you to end up there the same way that you started out.
Mm,
You're going to be different. It's going to change you. It's going to cost you everything. Um, but he wants you to use you where you are. And
yeah.
if you're not where you should be, like I said, I had a friend of mine one time. There was a family, and this really probably needs to be said, but there was a family that was going on a mission field, and um, he was like, "Man, I was sitting behind this family. They were getting ready to go like the next week or two," and he said, "I was sitting behind his family, and I look at them and I go, wow, they're getting ready to go on the mission field, and here I am not going." And he felt guilty that he wasn't going, to the mission field like they were. And I looked at him, I said, well, do you feel called to go? And he goes, no. And I said, do you feel like you should pursue it? I mean, what should you do? And he's like, no. And I'm like, well, that's not for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you don't look at other people and go, wow, I'm just not like that, and I feel guilty because I'm not sold out enough to Jesus. Well, listen, here's a good rule of thumb. If God's calling you to do something, you won't go, oh gosh, I got to do it, you know, or it's a strain. It'll just make sense to you. It'll be like a natural thing. Like when I first got arrested with this whole concept and idea, I would listen to some of the awfulest recordings. I mean, I would have. This was back when cassettes were the king, right? So,
Remember them days?
yeah, everybody, cassette tapes. Yeah, I just lost how many people, but anyway, but the cassette tape was so badly recorded, I had to turn the volume way up and strain to listen, okay? Because what was on the tape was so important to me, I could not just go, it's a bad recording, throw it and chuck it, right? I had to listen to it. So that's why this format, the length of it, how we're doing it, the technology of it. Look, if I'm saying anything that's close to what I was being said on that tape, you will listen to this in any way you can.
Yeah.
You
That's
will
right.
you will not shrink back. But you know what? If God's not arresting your heart to to pursue it, okay. I'm not.
Are you going to go to hell for not pursuing it?
No, no, no. That's
Yeah.
not part of the contract. But
That's right.
there will be a reckoning. Like I hear all the like I say some radical stuff sometimes. I was in a group of people and I said, you're not going to be judged on your sin. That's not what you're going to be judged on. I mean, the example of the talents and the example of the pounds, they were not. They were judged on their performance, yes, but they were judged on what they possessed and what they did with what they possessed. And that's what we're going to be judged on, man. is going to be judged on what you have and what you did with it. Did you bury it, or did you invest it? And man, that sucks because there's a lot of people that are not investing at
Well,
all.
and that brings up a good point. So let me ask this question. So, very practical question, but somebody could be sitting there listening and saying, okay, well, what do I invest it in?
Ugh, great question. Yeah.
And so what now, and this is what I would say as you answer this. This is our this is our model, and I'm
Yeah.
doing this with my hands
Yeah. Yeah.
like a globe, like
Yeah.
a globe.
Yeah. Exactly.
This is our geographical map.
Hmm.
So do you invest it like a missionary would do? Do you invest it in another country? Do you invest it in a church? Where do and who do or what do you invest that in?
The answer is yes. Everywhere, anywhere, everywhere you can. It's like just like you would probe, just like you would probe the stock market or probe some sort of business venture. Uh, that's the way you do this with this information. You start. There's going to be some times you're going to invest and it's not going to pan out, and so that investment fails in a way. Not completely, but it fails in a way. Um,
But you've
because
got your foot wet in the stock market. You've been able to say you've been a part of this investment,
right.
and yeah, it didn't produce like you expected or wanted, but you can at least say you played the game.
Well, not only can you play the game, but you learned what didn't work.
There you go.
Yeah. So in this, I don't want to make it just a game or make it money, but it's if you don't try to invest in people, um, then you're never going to know what works and what don't work. Um, but the Great Commission, once it grabs hold, man, it takes over and becomes your life. And everything it doesn't. And I tell this to people. They look at me like I don't need one more thing to do. I'm not trying to add to your day. I'm trying to change why you do your day. That's
That's
a
a good statement.
that's a big difference. I don't.
Yeah,
You may do the exact same actions and not change one minute of your schedule, but it changes why you do it. Yeah, your vision. Yeah.
that's perception right there, brother.
Yeah, we're walking backwards into how we normally teach it.
I mean, I'm just like thinking what you just said is, and that's not even our agenda.
Mm-hmm.
That's the work of the Spirit, because
Yeah.
proper information plus spiritual illumination does bring the vision,
Yes.
the God-sized vision. You, me, anybody else in this process cannot do that in somebody else. We don't have the power to do that. What we do have the power to do is to give the information.
Yes.
Or I say power, what is required is to give the information, is to give the Spirit an opportunity to do what you just said.
Right. And I had a conversation with somebody that probably should have known this, but they were frustrated about somebody's hearing or reaction to truth.
Was that me? That's probably
No, no,
me.
no. It may sound familiar, but no, I'm not tagging you. But I told him, I said, listen, I said, you can't control what people hear. The only thing you can control is the flow of information. And that's it.
Yeah, that's good right there.
That's all
Yeah.
you can control. So make sure you have the information concise, straight, lined up. Give it to them as best you can. But in the long run, man, you cannot pound it into anybody's head and stop trying. And when someone just goes, I don't agree with that, or I don't believe that, go, okay,
Yeah.
fine. I mean, don't. I mean, like, if you're trying to make something to where it doesn't look like a 3-year-old just went at it, then that's going to take some skill. And if somebody's doesn't really want to learn the skills, if somebody really doesn't want to take the time, do you really want them doing it? But say that they get to a certain point and you can take what their bad effort did and you can take it and continue it, right? Go ahead and let them do what they want to do, and then you just rob them of of their effort. I've done that before, and it's not like you're being mean about it. It's just like they laid it down. They laid down, they worked with somebody and they took them to a point, and the person was frustrated with where they were, and then the person just drops them, and then you're like, well, hey, I'll help you if you want. And they're like, yeah, I'm looking for somebody to help me. It's like they're half baked.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, and I was gonna bring up that I talked briefly about this before we started about the crowd, about Jesus committing himself to the crowd versus Jesus committing himself to his disciples. And I had this conversation with my wife yesterday, and I told her, I said, Jesus was a great teacher at every juncture of his life, no matter whether he was one-on-one with the woman with the issue of blood, whether he was one-on-one with Zacchaeus, or whether he was 1 to 5,000 or 15,000 people. Jesus was a great teacher. Like, you can't deny that. It says all throughout Scripture, it talks about how he was a phenomenal information giver. He was great at giving the truth that he was hearing from his Father. And so that brings up the point about the Great Commission, where many people will think, well, can you not fulfill the Great Commission with a crowd compared to fulfilling the Great Commission with one person? Would it not seem more logical? And this is where I would step in and say, I don't think there's anything logical about the Great Commission compared to today's religious system. I don't think there's any kind of logic. But my question is, the people that Jesus committed himself to, and when I say committed himself to, literally said, you have been given the tools to understand these parables, going back to Matthew 13.
Right.
But to you it's been given the right to hear and the right to see. To them, and I believe he's talking to the thousands of people that are there that day listening to him teach, it has not been given. I'm actually going to teach in a way that seems to hide the truth from them. Now, when we try to unpack that in a Sunday morning, and me as a pastor, as a guy that stands up very regularly, how do we see Jesus? And this again might be for, I don't know if it's for a pastor, but I guess my question is, this is something that I've been struggling with for 20 plus years, which is, I'm a guy that likes to take a gun and kill 2 birds with 1 shot. And it would seem more logical to stand up in front of a crowd of people, scattering the truth, and expecting that in that crowd, there's got to be somebody that hears this. There's got to be a better, this has got to be the better way of getting in front of 5,000 or 15,000 or even 50 compared to 1.
Right.
But how have you seen this Great Commission play out compared to what most people think is the way to fulfill the Great Commission? Like how I'm fishing.
Yeah.
I think you know what I'm fishing for, but I'm fishing for our listeners.
Yeah. No. I think it's because that's a perspective that we don't give a lot of thinking to. I mean, we don't think about that because we know it's it's not really a good way to do it. I mean, can you do it? Can God use it to do that? Yeah, but it's not going to produce what you think it's going to produce, because part of this whole process is verification of information, right? So how is a pastor scattering truth from a pulpit 30, 40, 50, 100 feet away going to verify that the person understood him clearly?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Is there any vehicle in that congregation or in his model that's going to allow him to verify what that guy heard or thought he heard? Okay?
Mm.
Right? So he makes a point. Is he go, sir, in row 34, third seat in, what did I just say? He's just not going to do that. I mean, that's part of why has to be individual. It doesn't necessarily be one-on-one. If you don't want to do one-on-one, you want to do one on 10, one on 15. Okay, fine. You get to one on 20, you're getting out of you're getting past the ability to go, what did I just say? Because the bigger the group, the more you give people crevices to hide in, and where they don't have to interact. I'm not
Yeah.
as gifted as that person, so I don't say it as well as that person, and that's another thing too. Whether vehicle, does your model allow for that person to take the information and regurgitate it to somebody else, or at least back to you? So the answer is no. So just,
Yeah.
I mean, there's other reasons, but just on those 2 points right there, you can see the system is not set up to transfer information strategically to people.
In a way that would agree with how Jesus did it.
Yes, for purposes he did it. Like
That's right.
now, but if you take somebody who has been trained to hear, capture information, that's a whole different story. But at some point, there has to be some up close, personal, this is what I'm expecting, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going. And then you can sit him back in. Once he is fully trained, then you can put him in a group. And it's real beneficial then,
Yeah.
after he's been cultivated and trained and taught and given a purpose. Like, and this is an example I've asked, I don't know how many pastors, in groups and individually, and it's really uncomfortable. It's like showing up in your underwear. It's just really uncomfortable when you
Had
get.
those nightmares.
Yeah, exactly. And I asked him this question, and it's so funny is we're our strategy just doesn't match Jesus's so much. I think you should know where I'm going, and you have no clue until I pop you right between the eyes. Um, I always say, okay, if you're a pastor and you in your congregation you have 5 men or 5 individuals. It could be women. I'm not sexist, 100%. So it's a joke. It's a joke. Calm down. Um, so if you have 5 individuals in your congregation and you know that they are taking heavy, heavy notes on everything that you say, and they're going to capture everything that they can to repeat it exactly, and that they're going to repeat that at least 3 times that week to people outside your church building. Number one, would that change the way you presented information? Would it change the way you prepared? Okay.
Absolutely.
The answer is yes. So the question is then, and I asked this: would you be shocked to find this out, that this is happening without your intervention? And the first thing is they would be shocked. Yes, they say that would absolutely shock me. Number two is, yes, it would change the way I prepared. Yes, number three, it would change the way I presented. And then I'm like, why? Then what are we doing? why aren't we cultivating that? Why aren't we making that happen? How easy is that to do? Stand up and I'm not telling people what to do necessarily.
Point one,
Point.
point two,
Explain that. Explain
point
that.
three. Bill's a turd. What else do you want me to? That was funny. I don't know. That's been a couple years back,
More than a couple.
and yeah, I'm a glutton for punishment. Bill will say that a lot, but I like to be used as an example, I guess, unintentionally. But I think you had listened or
Yeah.
something. There was a
Yeah.
message. I can't remember what I did.
I was listening to one of your messages, and I said, and all I said was, I think all I said, and you can correct me. I think all
Yeah,
I
you
said
were
was, would you do me a favor and help me out? I said, make sure that your points are clear. And point one is, point two is, three is, and that way at least I know how you constructed your outline. So I mean, not that I couldn't make up my own, but I
yeah.
was more interested in what you were trying to make your points.
Well, and also, and it goes back to, I'm the one that asked the question.
Was it?
You're the one, like, no, like right now.
Oh,
Like, we're even having this conversation about pastors that makes me uncomfortable
yeah.
because I'm a pastor.
Right.
And it makes me uncomfortable because if I'm honest about it, I know compared to a lot of other churches that here at Catawba Baptist, there is a very high precedence put on note taking.
Mm.
But there's not, it's like they take notes, and every now and then I'll say, now what are you doing with the information? Because you've got to give the information away to give yourself even an opportunity to have the miracle of God flow over you through the information as the Spirit works,
Right.
to give you proper illumination, proper vision.
Right.
But it's like, and so I guess, coming back, chasing my tail a little bit here, um, um, I'm still challenged after almost 18 full years here at Catawba, literally going on 18 years next month. And I'm looking around and I'm like, yeah, there's some things that's changed in 18. There's a lot that's changed in 18 years, but what has been produced in those 18 years?
Right.
And personally, what I've seen produced has not so much taken place on Sunday mornings as it has on the mornings for years and years and years that I've met individually with guys,
Right.
or even corporately with two and sometimes three guys at the same time. Those are the ones that I would guarantee you they might not be turning other men into disciples like we expect them to, but I guarantee you they understand why they take notes, and they understand the conviction of what's expected when when there is information that is received.
Right.
Because again, we know it's rigged.
Yeah.
But trying to get somebody else to see that, especially somebody that doesn't stand up every Sunday and give the information away, whether it's Sunday school, whether it is in a pulpit. And when I say we know it's rigged, explain that.
So rigged means, when you say it's rigged, it means that the action you think is going to benefit you actually benefits everyone. And like, what is the goal of every believer? We always say, the Sunday school answer, well, to be like Jesus, but it's rigged that you can't get there alone. that's the rigged part of this. You can't get to that spot until you're willing and able to give away information. Jesus he showed up packed full of all the information that the Father had, the Logos. And, that was his job, to give it away. And had he never given it away, he would have never developed into the person that we know him to be. And probably would have never got himself killed. So,
Yeah.
Had he not opened his mouth and to relay information, and not just to relay information, but to relay information to the point to where his men can repeat it. He even says it, you're not going to remember everything right now, but when the Holy Spirit comes, he'll remind you of all things I've commanded you, or everything I've said to you.
And interesting, I kind of had this thought, and somebody would definitely disagree with this, and I'm not saying it so I can be controversial. I don't think, I just said I don't think from what I've seen in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that Jesus transferred a ton of doctrine. However, we can build doctrine off what we see Jesus doing or saying. All right? So it's not like what we read in Paul's letters, what we read in James, which is a very practical book of the New Testament. And and I guess it's like, okay, well, so somebody would be saying, well, what information do I share? Like, what do I give away?
Right.
And a lot of people will give away their doctrine. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily right or wrong, but what information did Jesus give away? He gave away what he was hearing from the Father, but also what he knew about the Tanakh, or the whole complete Old Testament.
Right.
And then not just gave it away, but he displayed it, he showed it, he demonstrated the word as he delivered the word. There was a delivering and a demonstration of it. And I guess I don't want to push us into this hole and not be able to get out of it. But when we are sitting one-on-one with somebody, there is an idea that we have to teach some kind of a doctrinal understanding. Right. Where, and I guess what my question would be is, what's the information we share? And I know it's the word, but I don't, when I meet with guys, I don't do, it's not that I don't do the doctrine, because there's a doctrine in my mind, like is a doctrine in your mind. There's the Calvinist view, the Arminianist view. There's all these views.
Right.
And it's like, you can get so bogged down on that.
Sure.
But I guess my question is, so what information did Jesus share with his guys? And what information do we need to be receiving and picking through what we're hearing and then giving away? Or what kind of information?
Well, I mean, Jesus had something that we don't have. He had a group of guys around him that knew exactly what the contract was. Okay? We don't have people like that.
That's a good point.
Explain
the contract.
Well,
explain the contract again, because we talked about it.
Yeah, we talked about the Jewish education system a little bit, and just to remind or inform, if you've never listened to the other ones, if you're just jumping in now, the men that Jesus had knew full well that they were to become exactly like the rabbi. That was just understood. Jesus didn't have to tell them that. It was in the culture. It was in the process of what a disciple was at that level. And they knew that they had to listen intently so that they could repeat him exactly and be exactly like their rabbi. So they were listening on another level than Joe Schmo that comes sleepwalking in their bunny slippers into the church service. They come with their pillow and their robes because they know they're going to take a nap in church. They would have, Jesus's men never showed up like that. They never showed up going, okay, well, let me just get through this session so I can go fishing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not how they approached it. So
God, he went an hour. He taught an hour today. Dang, don't he know we got lunch plans and fishing plans?
My stomach was growling, and I knew the oven was on, and well, I don't have it much anymore. Used to be when I was a kid. Mom would set the stove, put the oven on, and calculate how long it would take to get back from church to home to have Sunday dinner, and if the preacher went too long, it burnt the roast. And my dad used to brag. He said, "I burnt more roasts than anybody." But anyway, so I think and part of it, a lot of what this is about is tactic and strategy and goal.
Yeah.
Once you understand the goal, once you understand what you're trying to do, where you're going, the rest of it kind of falls in line. I mean, you'll worry about the stuff that really matters, and you'll forget about the stuff that just is what we call the minutia. You like that word?
Yeah.
The minutia of being a believer. Just like you can say to some people, some people may say they hear the word Calvinism, and as soon as they heard, oh, he's a Calvinist, well, I can't fellowship with him, or I can't work with him. I hear Calvinist and I go, who cares?
Yeah. Doctrine.
Okay, whatever.
And that goes back to, when I was thinking about this and asked the question, and it's, I don't know, man. I guess I don't see it. I'm not a doctor. I don't show my hand a lot.
Right.
I don't, I love it when people are looking in at me and they're like, I just don't know where Derek stands on this. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you don't know, because if you think about it, how often do you think the disciples were scratching their head about, well, what's our rabbi think about this? And it's not that Jesus did not have a precedence of truth, but there were things he just wouldn't show his hand on because it didn't make a hill of flipping beans.
Even if you won, you didn't win.
And that goes back to a good point, because we often like to win with the doctrine we choose to believe.
Right.
And then if we're always wanting to win, that the doctrine tends to be what's up front. And then what we're creating is not necessarily followers of Jesus or disciples. We're recreating a man-made, divisive, because that's denominationalism is men divided among themselves.
Right.
And yes, is there? I mean, like I've heard people say, well, if you don't agree with Calvinism, you don't understand the gospel. And I'm like, well, that's bull crap, because Calvinism wasn't even in existence, the idea of it, when Jesus was here. And it goes back to my point. Do we hear Jesus rambling on and on and on about doctrine? No, we hear Jesus rambling on and on and on about his Father and how he himself lined up with what his Father had always been saying.
Yeah.
Going all the way back to Genesis 1.
Right.
And so what do? We take the information that's in the Word and we give that information away, and we say, here's Jesus, here's Jesus, here's Jesus. This is how you do it. This is how they did it in the Old Testament. Goes back to what we just talked about before we started. The Kings.
Mm-hmm.
You walked me through that for literally almost a year.
Yeah.
And now it's like I've been pricked again in my spirit with I got to give this information away. I've been sitting
Right.
on it for 2 years.
Right.
But where do we not see disciple making truths
Hmm.
in the
Oh
Kings?
yeah,
You
absolutely.
better bet your bottom dollar.
Yeah, yeah. It's everywhere. Once you get the goggles on, a
Mm,
lot of people talk about beer goggles. I guess you got disciple goggles. Once you get that on, man, you see it
yeah,
every place. I mean, it's
right.
and you bring up a great point. Is there's a lot of things that are in the text that are very clear, 100% clear,
Yeah,
but there are some things in the text that's kind of gray, and it's debatable. Then it comes into interpretation. And you know what? My opinion may not be correct. Okay, I have an opinion, but it may not be correct. So that I don't die on that hill. I did a Bible study in the community that I live in, and the lady that was over the community, organization, I told her, I said, hey, I want to start a Bible study. She said, you go ahead and do that. I stay far away from that. I don't want no part of it. That's where a lot of people fight, and a lot of people, a lot of division and everything else. And I said, don't worry about it. It's not going to happen that way. I said, I'm pretty. I give people a lot of room. And she's like, okay, whatever. And so later on, it came out in the people in the study. They were like, they were just remarking on the fact that I gave them room to have their own opinions and their own
mm,
belief. And even the lady that was the programmer at that time made that remark. And it's just because, you know, we fight about the dumbest stuff that makes no difference whatsoever, but we give ground on the stuff that's going to matter for eternity, which is the strategy of God. It's a strategy of Jesus, yes, but it came from the Father originally. So, that's what I'll die on. But it's so
yeah,
clear in the text, and I mean, if you say, I don't agree with that, I don't believe disciple making is the way and all that, I'd be like, okay, I'm about to hurt you. I just want to let you know you're about to get completely body slammed. And then take you through the scripture, and let the scripture tell you what it's supposed to be.
yeah.
But uh, you know, and I'm not trying to make myself look better than anybody else. That's worthless in itself. But we have to get on the same page. And once we get on the same page with what Jesus did, I understand my process isn't perfect. I understand it's not what Jesus did, because we don't live in that culture. It just doesn't exist. It's weird in our culture. What they did, what was common in their culture, and is common in Israel today, is weird to us because we
Yeah.
we we think more Greek than we do Jew, and that's. But we
Which
have to work.
creates a whole
Yeah,
another issue.
yeah. We have to work with what we got, right?
Yeah.
The question is, are we putting information in people that is repeatable and reproducible, or or are we just building something to ourselves? Putting ourselves ahead and above everybody else and make them feel like they can't attain where we are. If that's what you're producing, that's anti what Jesus did.
And and then you bring up another point about, and we've said this, I remember us talking about it, it's, we're not dumbing down any information,
No.
but Jesus, let's go back to our model, your model, my model. There are and were many times where Jesus had to bring the information to Peter's level, to James and John, sons of thunder's level. And it's not like he said it different, but, and his intentions did not change. His intentions were always the same from the beginning, even until today. The intentions are the same. His
Absolutely.
intentions don't change. But sometimes we have to understand, and you've caught yourself doing this in this is our fifth conversation. I've heard you say it. I'm thinking like the common man. I'm thinking like the common man would be thinking right now. And what we have to do, what I found myself doing, which I tend to be a deep thinker, it doesn't necessarily mean that I get stuck in my thoughts, but I tend to go real deep in my thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got to realize, well, number one, a lot of people don't even understand where the dang stairway is to go down there where I just went. In the day, they're looking around like, what the heck is he talking about? And number two, even a foundation for that kind of conversation or transfer of information. So what I have had to really work hard on, and being a pastor has helped me see it, but it's also helped me fail,
Right.
helped me fail miserably. So it's a double-edged sword. For me, being a pastor has cut my throat time and time again, but also being a pastor has humbled me and has brought me down to the point of I have got to take the information as it's presented to me and not try to re-say it better, not try to make it sound like Derek's got it all figured out. Just say what you need to say, shut up, trust the process, encourage them to take notes of whatever it is that you're saying, and then encourage them to give this thing away to somebody else.
Right. Right.
That's a great starting point for the process of you're wanting to start making disciples. That's a great way to start. You get the info, you capture it, you give it away, and you give it away the same way somebody gave it away to you, with the expectation for them to do the same thing for somebody else.
Right. Exactly. Um, and you have to inspect it. There's something that
So
you
how do you find it? How do you inspect? What's a way to inspect?
give them an assignment. You have to have an assignment, and there's no other way to. There's no other way to verify. Giving them an assignment verifies, are they listening, how they're listening, and why they're listening. it,
Hold on, say that one more time. Say
it,
that for me, not our viewers. This is all about me right now.
yeah, exactly. So it reveals to, boy, how did I say that?
You, how, when, where,
How
what.
they're listening, how they're listening. That they're
Their,
listening, how they're listening,
yeah,
and
their intention with it, or their
golly, I'm glad it's recorded.
why, or
What?
why they're
listening? Yeah, why they're
listening.
listening?
Yeah, that was that. I like that one.
Because some people see, like, whenever I got in this process, you know what I saw? I saw a great teacher that I wanted to be like. That's what I saw, and I wanted to be the dude. I wanted to be the guy. So God put a carrot of selfishness in front of me to draw me in. Now, some people may not like that. That's okay, but that's what happened. So I came at this looking for somebody that could help me sound more intelligent,
Mm-hmm.
and or a cut
Make you sound
above.
better when you stand up on Sundays.
Yeah, yeah, man,
Yeah,
yeah, man. Where I could say the but boom, and
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
hey, let me show you what let me wow you, kind of thing. Because he was talking like nobody I ever seen. I'm like, I want to be that dude, and uh, but as I went, it had it reveals as I went. I think about how I approached it, how I did it, revealed what I was trying to do, and it would allow for adjustment. So like I've been in the same situation, of listening to somebody present, And then it's very evident either they did not really hear you, or their motivation to hearing you is skewed. And not that you're going to try to correct that necessarily, but you're going to play to that. You know, like I probably shouldn't say this, but I'll say it anyway. But
Ain't nobody listening.
yeah,
No one's
no one's listening
listening.
at this
It's
point
just
anyway. So if I know that if somebody's flesh is getting fed by, presenting a certain lesson or being relied upon in a certain way, I may starve that. I may starve you out. I may take away that lesson in an assignment, or I may only give you one or none, and let you wallow in it, and let that barb work its way into your psyche, because my intention for you is to make you a selfless, non-thinking about yourself person, and whatever I've got to do to get you there. And some people can't handle that. Some people won't handle that. If they're not the point, they're not going to be in it. So,
and I remember it's a good point for me, personal story. Um, I guess as a pastor, you kind of come in and you think, well, I'm going to lead this like I lead my church. Like I'm going to carry this mandate of the Great Commission the same way I am the shepherd of my flock or church or whatever. And early on for me, this process humbled me in itself, just the process. But for me to be around people like Jason White, you, Jason Dillingham, specifically those three, and you guys are the common man, right? And I know you bring Matt into the equation, Matt and I both being pastors, but Matt and I both being humbled by the process of this has got to go beyond us and what we do on a Sunday morning.
yeah.
This has got to go beyond us being able to stand up and knock it out of the park every Sunday with the information God puts on our heart. Not that what we're saying is wrong, or that knocking it out of the park, the desire to knock it out of the park, is wrong.
Right.
But there's something bigger. And what's bigger is training the common man not to be able to do it just like us, but training the common man just to be able to say it.
Yeah.
Just to be able to repeat it.
Right.
And again, we've already said this cannot be established on a Sunday morning. It's just impossible. And that's coming from me. Again, that's in my opinion.
Right.
But this is very doable in a one-on-one situation. But for the common man, you're going to have a lot easier once you learn and are trained to the point. You're not going to have the baggage that I have. There's not going to be the baggage, and the baggage comes with, well, I want to say it like Derek says it. I want to do it like Derek does it, and just kind of like Herb. I'm sure, because that's the man you're talking about.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, because he was a very institutionalized guy, a lot more than maybe even what I am.
Yeah.
And I know it was, and heard you talk about some of the early guys, and I had met a couple of those guys 20 plus years ago, and they were all very institutionalized to a point that they could stand up in a pulpit, and they were very much trained like Herb would be trained.
Right.
So, what's our goal with the guy we're with? What's our goal with this one guy that we're with? Is it to get him to stand up and be able to communicate this in front of people?
Yeah. I mean, it had you. I mean, we have to work with the model we have, right? And we got to work within the framework of what we've got. and what do we have? You know, we go overseas and we do pastors conferences. Why do we do pastors conferences? Because that's pretty common. I mean, you don't have to explain to people what you're doing.
Mm.
And could you go and just do individual stuff? Sure, you could, but it's hard to break in to the culture or the community of the believers that way. I'm not opposed to either way, but usually we and we just did this, last year or this year, where we went and we're just looking for, we're looking for that individual to cut one or two. We're not, I think we talked to maybe to 150, 180 people, individuals, but we're only staying in contact with like maybe 3. So, out of 150, 180, we got 3 people. Some people will be like, well, that's not very good. No, that's fantastic, actually. Because that's the way it's going to work. It's going to work much better that way. But it's not going to happen overnight either. And I think that if I had to concisely put what am I trying to do with the common man, is how to work under the radar to impact the world without anybody knowing it. I know that sounds weird, but really, the more attention you attract to this, the more you kind of you hurt the process. That's why a pastor can be effective in this, but it's very hard because he got a lot of things drawn on him. But a common man, not so much. He can move pretty easily, and work in this process. So.
And I would even say this. I would dare say this, but I'm going to say it. But I would say that if I could just get one common man, personally, from pastor standpoint, if I could just get one of the common men, to move beyond what they see from me on Sunday, what they hear from me on Sunday, and move beyond that, then I'm not saying I would quit, but that would be a phenomenal feat in this process. And I'm not saying I haven't, but it's hard to reproduce yourself when what they see on Sunday really isn't what's common.
Right.
What they see on Sunday is very uncommon.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about this in the past. What
Yeah.
people think they got to have to be a mover and shaker for God, right? Anybody that's passionate about being a believer, they want to be a mover and a shaker, and that's not in a bad way. Not like they're trying to be something, fleshly. It's they really want to do something, that matches their desire and passion for God. It's fantastic. But they look at it and they say, well, the most spiritual person in the room is the guy in the pulpit. So if I'm going to be effective, I gotta be up there. And you know what? That's just not feasible for everybody. Everybody can't do that. Everybody, how would you do that? That's why I think we get this idea of church growth is producing these other churches, so these guys that are passionate can have a pulpit or a platform to do the real work. When actually, that's really not the real work. I mean, the real work is one-to-one individual. That's where everybody can take part. You don't even have to have an organization. You don't have a building. You don't have to have a committee or anything else. You can do that, and you don't even have to ask anybody's permission.
Yep.
You can just do it. When early on, I haven't had anybody say this to me lately, but early on, We were talking about what God was doing. We were going to different countries, and one lady said was like, "Well, how are you doing that? How did you get there?" And I said, "I bought a ticket." I don't understand your question. What do you mean? She's like, "Well, um, you know, did what organization did you go through?" None. Well, who told you you could go? Nobody. What do you mean told me who I could go? You know, I'm just doing it. Nobody's saying I can. Nobody's saying I can't. But that's the mentality that we're talking about breeding into people. Um, which the one thing I've been wanting to talk about, what kind of person do you have to be in order to be in this process or do this process? But in Matthew 28:16, it says that this is, the beginning of Great Commission. But the 11 disciples proceeded to Galilee, to the mountain which Jesus had designated, or appointed, I think is in King James, is appointed. But the reason that the word designated or appointed is so important is in the King James, not in other translations, but in the King James, in 1 Corinthians 16:15, it translates that same word as addicted. Okay? Now, not that other words are better or worse, it's just I really like that King James word, addicted. So what kind of a person is going to do this process? Somebody's addicted.
Yeah.
And my wife hates when I say this. She hates it. I said, what will addiction do? I said, addiction will make you throw your grandma down the steps.
See why she hates it.
But it will.
Yeah.
Addiction will make you
That's a good
steal.
point.
It'll make you do anything. You will give anything. You'll degrade yourself to any level to get what you need, because the addiction's so powerful.
And you don't even thinking about that addiction, going back to what we kind of started the podcast with, was our personal experience with the first taste of that drug. Like we not and the last thing we want to do is compare the Great Commission to a drug.
No.
But
it is.
Yeah. And going back, it's not something you can. It's kind of like it's out of your control. You're out of control.
You are out of control.
But you're under the control of the only marching orders that the Holy Spirit adheres to in the human life, in our undivine being. We're not divine people, man. Like, we're as rotten to the core. We're going back to what we started out as. You're going to go back to, but it's just like this. It's like this divine marching order.
Yeah.
Gets put in here, and going back to, this is kind of like our full wrap up, of what we talked about today, but going back to the idea of the controlled men, committed men, this faithful mentality is all birthed out of this revelation of, holy cow, this is not just what Jesus and his men did, but this is what was fully expected of Adam and Eve all the way back in the garden, which is to reproduce themselves as they were created in the image of God. The reproduction of themselves can only happen through, of course, the physical act for them, but the spiritual act, and the idea was God was saying, reproduce me everywhere you go into the life of other people. And that's another connection to this thing's all over the book.
Mm-hmm.
It's all over the book. And then once you see that, it's like everywhere you go, there's a hit. There's a hit.
Yeah.
You're like that drug addict.
Yep.
You're like the alcoholic walking into the liquor store.
Yep.
It's just rows and rows and rows of whatever you want that will continue to feed your addiction, your passion, your desire.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
That's a great connection right there, man.
Yeah, and yet that's not my word. That's what that's in the text. And when you read
appointed,
appointed or designated or addicted. So Jesus had addicted them. In other words, once you see disciple making and world impact connected, that the only and that's why it's been so powerful with me, because there was a time, again, one of those moments that your psyche is seared, your spirit is seared with the hot truth, and I'm just driving down the highway listening to these truths that are being presented, and man, it hit me like it was like disciple making. Not only is the world my assignment, but disciple making is the only way it's going to get it done. It's the only vehicle. It's the only vehicle that'll make the trip. And once you see it like that, I mean, how can anybody fight against that? It's like we fight vehemently about Jesus being the only way to the Father, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're locked into that. Can you imagine being as locked in as that with disciple making is the only way that's going to get it done? So you can have your ministries. I don't care. You can have your big conglomerates. You can have your multi-level tiered, church producing or organization producing stuff. Okay, it ain't going to get it done. Then in itself will not get it done. If it would have, if that's true, it had already been done. But it ain't. In fact, in a lot of ways, we're worse off. We got all this technology, we got all these ministries, we got all this stuff, and we're worse off as believers. Guess what that means? That means it don't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and I'll say this, it kind of comes along beside of what you had just said, is the stealth. You made that comment about 30 minutes ago. You talked about doing this in silence. You talked about where, on the other hand, I think early on you and I both were trying to make it famous, along with making ourselves famous.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's always going to be baked into the cake of this.
Yep.
And one thing I've learned recently, over the last couple of years, through getting my tail end handed to me, which is a common occurrence for me, but hopefully for other people too. I don't like being in that boat that's always seems like it's sinking. But one of the things that I've come to understand about it and actually appreciate about the process is that you don't have to force anything. Like you don't even have to force yourself.
Right.
And it goes back to anytime I felt like I forced something, it's because I wanted something that God either knew I wasn't ready for, or I wanted something to put another brick on my empire. Anytime that there is the desire to force something, I have to check myself personally, because I'm a chutzpah kind of guy.
Yeah.
I'm a zealot at times, mixed with that leadership mentality, and I'm always getting checked by this process. I've said it hundreds of times. I've said it to the guys I've sat down with. if you want to be disciplined by God, if you want to be protected by your own flesh, jump into this thing. Just take a dive. Even if you stick your toe into it, you get a taste of this thing, and it will rip you apart in the flesh
And,
while building your spirit man up. Because this is the greatest way to build God's kingdom,
right.
is to make disciples.
And to some people may hear what you just said and they go, "Wow, that sounds bad." No, it's good.
It's imperative.
You won't be going, "Oh, this is terrible." No, you'll be in agreement with God. You'll be moving in His movements, and He'll look at your flesh and He'll say, "That stinks pretty bad." And you're like, "Yeah, you know what? That's true. It does. It stinks pretty bad." And He's like, "I think we need to get rid of that." And you're like, "Yeah, I think we do." And he goes, "This is gonna hurt like hell." And He goes, "Yeah, I know. Do it." We call it fatal fun.
It's fatal fun, and it's worth every single.
It's you're going to disappear. But there's no other way for you to really live. Going back to Paul, now we really live because of you.
You're freaking psycho, Bill. You're psycho.
I am. But the person that's going to be successful in this understands their importance. They understand how important they are, but they also understand how much they have to fade away. So, but only
it's
a person. It's
imperative that I leave.
Yes.
I must
leave. I must go away.
As Jesus said to His disciples.
You start.
So what were you going to say about the people? What were you were going to?
Huh?
You were going to say something. You said, but the people. I saw your lips. I didn't hear, but you said something. You were gonna say something about, but the people, but
no.
Yeah, and I think
he was just saying to the people, I gotta go. I think that's what.
Yeah. And that goes back to, what did we talk about today? Well, we fleshed out the Great Commission.
Mm-hmm.
I think we fleshed it out in a way that we fleshed it out hundreds of times in 20 plus years. You and I think we fleshed it out a lot, because I'm like, I got to see it to believe it. I'm a visual learner, thus I'm going to tend to be a visual teacher, but I've got to see it. And I'm like, and I don't see this. And early on I didn't. I was just kind of running blind. But what I was running with was protecting me. What I was running with was producing something in me that no other truth I'd ever held had done, other than Jesus, King, Christ, the way, the truth, and the life, right? But and now, I look back at it and I'm like, wow, man, where's the 20 plus, almost right at 21 years? I mean, it's
insane,
like, wow, dude. Yeah,
it goes by fast.
And then I'm like, man, I've sucked more than I've succeeded. But thank God that there's a lot of suck in the process.
Yeah, anybody that takes nobody's ever skilled right away. I mean, at anything. I mean, you may have some natural ability, but it still takes a lot of honing your craft, and that there's a lot of that in here. There's a lot of that. You're gonna, somebody says, "Well, I don't know how to say it like you do." Well, okay, learn. Well, my favorite is, "Well, that's over my head." Pick up your head.
Lift it a little higher. It's not near as deep as you think.
Don't think it's too thoughtful for you. But I would like to get, maybe next time we can get it more into the nuts and bolts of the Great Commission, and really look at some of the really important, well, it's all important, but some of the really key things in the Great Commission that's I think once you understand them, not that I don't know who's listening, but once you understand them, they really clear the decks. And you can really, I think the Great Commission in itself shows why the institution will never do this. Not because it doesn't want to, it's just incapable. It's just incapable of doing it. So with that, anything else? I'll let you have the last word.
No, brother. I think beneficial is an understatement.
Yeah.
This conversation. And if somebody has listened for the last hour and 20 minutes, and they're still listening, I would encourage you to reach out to myself or Bill if you have, and most of you know us somewhere along the line, or someone that is connected. And I would say I think you can do that in the comments.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can do that in the comments, and maybe somewhere along the line, I guess we can leave our contacts.
Well, I mean, I think there's an email attached to the
yeah,
to this channel, and I'll put it like this: if somebody happens across this channel, which I don't know how they would, but if you happen across this channel and you've listened to every conversation, you're in the 5th conversation and you're still listening, wow.
Yeah.
What a miracle of God.
Definitely get in touch with us.
Yeah, please.
Because we really want to screw you up.
Well, or if you're, maybe somebody's just that diligent in attacking us for some reason.
It won't be the first time. And I would even say,
I don't know why
if there is, and if there is a pastor a perplexed pastor, a pastor that realizes that their Sunday morning stuff isn't getting above the ceiling, it's not going not only to the throne of God, it's not making the impact, then definitely reach out to us.
Yeah.
I feel, I don't know, man, just today I feel more of a compassion for my peers as the institutional guys.
Yeah.
Because it's just so damn hard, man. And I said it just,
It is.
dude, it is a nutcracker of a task to handle something that ultimately cannot be produced in what you are trying to produce things in.
Mm.
But there is a ton of great learning experience in this wilderness. What we call institutionalism and the pastoral. But I'd love to talk to anybody that would be willing to chat over that too. So we're more than just available to listen to for an hour and a half.
But I mean, this format and the purpose of this channel is not really to recruit necessarily. It's mainly to just assist people that are already in the process.
That's right. Good stuff, brother.
All right, man.
That's good, man.
Later, Mater.
See you, Billy Bob. See you, Billy Bob.
See you, bye.